Probably the single best piece of advice that I ever got in construction industry was a guy by the name of Warren Ortenblad. And he would come up and he would see me running my tail off. We were building senior living facilities in and around the Minneapolis market, and I was running his construction operation. And occasionally he'd come by and he said, "I'm not seeing you sit there with your feet up on the desk enough." He would say that almost all the time. And his comment when I sat down and talked to him is he says, "You're spending so much time being busy that you don't have time to think about those things that really matter." And so I think about that to this day. That's probably the single best piece of advice that I had ever gotten, was just stopping and taking a moment to think about what you're doing. That leads me to, one of my favorite quotes is by Henry Ford, who said, "Thinking is the hardest thing that human beings do, which is why so few people do it."
This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Welcome to Construction Genius. My name is Eric Anderton. My guest today is Dave Kievet, the president and COO of the Boldt Company. The Boldt Company is a nationally ranked construction company with offices all over the country. Dave has over 30 years of experience in leadership, and today you are going to learn some of the insights that he has gained through those years of experience. We have a terrific conversation. I want you to really pay attention to the different topics that we cover, because each one of them can have a tremendous impact upon your leadership, from how to delegate, how to have one-on-one meetings with your direct reports, how to help young leaders overcome some essential struggles in terms of moving from building projects to leading people. And Dave has insights in all of those areas that can be extremely helpful to you. So enjoy my interview with Dave. Feel free to share it with others. And thank you for listening to Construction Genius. Dave, welcome to Construction Genius. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Eric. I'm glad to be here.
You've been in the industry now for over 30 years. What is your definition of leadership?
Your primary focus as a leader is really, in my definition, is getting people to go to places that they themselves probably wouldn't go on their own, getting them to believe that they can accomplish their goals and their dreams and do things that they might not believe that they can do. So it's really to instill hope and courage into others to be able to accomplish things, right? It's not about your ability to get things done anymore. It's about getting other people to be able to accomplish those things.
How do you instill hope and courage in other people?
One of our greatest responsibility is the stewardship of the lives that are entrusted to us.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't happen in a broad brush of being able to accomplish things. You need to focus on individuals one at a time. You need to understand what the hopes and dreams are of those individuals, give them encouragement, give them coaching and mentoring in order to try to accomplish what they want to accomplish. One of my biggest beliefs is that as an employer in the construction industry, our job is to provide opportunities for our employees. It also focuses on our customers, it focuses on our communities, but I think it starts with our employees. So what we have to do is create an environment for our employees that allow them to fulfill what their hopes and dreams are, and to really create an environment to allow them to achieve their highest and best position in life. And by getting the most motivated individuals, then they're going to be able to take care of the customers and be able to build their projects and then be able to take care of the communities. But we have to invest the time in our employees to help them fulfill their dreams before we're able to get to what we need to do.
That's a lot of energy and effort that you have to take as a leader in individuals. What do you think is the best number of people to be reporting to one leader? What's the optimal number so that the leader is able to give that individual attention to a person that they need?
So what you're asking me is how many direct reports you should have, right?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
That is the question, yep.
That's a question that we've debated a lot over the years. I mean, there's some people out there that think that 15 to 7 is a good number. I happen to think you'll run yourself into the ground. For myself personally, for my direct reports, I try to focus in somewhere around that 7 to 8. that I can really focus some quality time with. And when I can focus some good quality time on 7 to 8, if each one of those can focus good quality time on 7 to 8, and then it begins to branch out, then you begin to get at the whole company. And I'm a strong believer that the speed of the leader sets the speed of the team. So if I can set the pace for my direct reports, they're in turn going to set the pace for their direct reports, and it'll get down to every level within the organization.
How do you define quality time?
Quality time is, it may not be the quantity of time that you're allowed, but how you choose to use the time that you have together. Construction is a pretty fast-paced business. I spend a lot of my time focusing in on problems that come up. And my schedule that I start out with at the beginning of the day is different than the one that actually unfolds before me. So a lot of times, amount of time that I have to spend with my direct reports is somewhat limited. So we've developed check-in sheet that basically each of my direct reports knows exactly what it is that we're going to cover when we get together. And there's a number of questions in there that range from how are their projects doing to how are their people doing to what are those issues that they need me to help resolve for them, or what roadblocks can I clear for them. And it's pretty much left to them to fill out before we get into this meeting so that we can spend the time focusing on those important points that are important to them. Not necessarily important to me, but what's important to them and what issues can I help them with that day. And that's what I consider quality time with the people that I spend. Is doesn't matter whether it's quality to me. What really matters is whether it's a quality time to them.
You have the one-on-one preparation with the check-in sheet beforehand and those 3 areas of project, people, and then any issues that that you can help them to clear up.
Well, I've got 7 or 11 questions that I have on a sheet. And it's not that we cover them all, right?
Yes.
We always start out with what's going well. I want to know what in their lives is going well, and both personally and professionally, right? Because I always think it's frame it in a positive light. And then we get into, what projects are they working on? What are the issues that they're having? What projects are they pursuing? How are they working on their personal development plans? What are the roadblocks they help me to help me clear? And then we usually finish up with, what are the other things that I should know about?
What is your outlook on supporting your direct reports through any personal issues that they're having in their lives that are perhaps not work related, but are distracting them from their work?
Well, that's one thing that I guess I've learned over the years. When I first started in this business, I believed that you could separate your personal life from your professional life. And I honestly believe that. But the longer that I'm in this industry, I realize that, my personal life, my professional life are just who I am. It all becomes me. So there are a lot of factors that influences somebody's behavior, and their personal issues influence their behavior as much as some of their professional issues. So all of the issues that they have, I'm interested in hearing about. Not that I can do anything about some of those, but at least being able to talk through them and provide them some advice and guidance as we talk about all of that.
Why do you think there is a lack of leadership in the construction industry?
Well, I think it's such a tactical business, right? The art of building a building is very tactical, right? You focus on sequential issues. You're focusing on getting materials there. You're focused on logistics. You're focused on bills. You're focused on the pricing and the cost reports and all that kind of stuff, which is very, very tactical. I don't think that people stop and think about what it is as a leader. I mean, a lot of times in delivering a project, you're focused on driving to completion and driving to deadlines and goals and budget constraints and all of that you try to treat people the same way. You try to manage people like you're managing materials. And it just doesn't work. Most of the people that are in the construction industry come from the building trades, or they come out of engineering schools, and they're very linear thinkers that have spent most of their times in engineering schools and learning about equations and calculations. And when they get thrown into an environment that really is more about the building of relationships, they just don't know how to function in that environment.
How do you help your people make that shift from being tactical to being more strategic in their leadership?
That's one of the most difficult transitions I think that construction leaders have. As a project engineer, even as a project manager where you're driving projects, you're rewarded on being able to do that. And a lot of times you can get the project done successfully and leave a wake of destruction in your path emotionally with people, but you're still rewarded for having accomplished the goal of completing the project, even though you've run over everybody on the job in order to do it. So that transition of going construction management to construction leadership or project leadership is a difficult one. And there's quite honestly, I think there's probably 50% make it and 50% flame out, that are never able to get over that hump.
What did you focus on as you came into new leadership roles to make that shift?
I had a lot of failures. I'm just going to say that fortunately, they weren't catastrophic. They could have been. I used to say that I went through the pond school of leadership training, and that was you just swam out the middle of the pond and they just keep throwing boulders at you and you keep grabbing them and swimming. If you can keep your head above the water, you do fine. If you go under, you're out. And well, I was fortunate that I made a lot of mistakes. I think that I'm very fortunate that I'm by nature self-reflective. So even though that I think that most would say that I'm a pretty driven individual, I also really believe in the power of the relationship. So I think over time, through a series of continuous self-reflecting, I've figured out what's worked and what hasn't worked. And I think that largely led to the success that I had. Had I been oblivious to my impact on those around me, I don't know if I'd necessarily be here.
Did you have someone who was mentoring you through your career that really was able to help point out some of these areas where you were struggling and give you some insights?
Well, I had a lot of help in pointing out where I was failing. Yeah, there were a lot of people that would give me the feedback I needed to understand whether I was succeeding or failing. But I've got kind of an interesting background and an interesting past. And because of that, I'm probably more apt to be a student of observing what can be improved. You might say I've got a continuous improvement bent to my personality. So when I take a look, I've had a number of construction leaders over the years that I've watched, and I've learned probably as much what not to do from observing their behavior as I've learned. The single best piece of advice that I ever got in construction industry was a guy by the name of Warren Ortenblad. And he would come up and he would see me running my tail off. We were building senior living facilities in and around the Minneapolis market. And I was running his construction operation. And occasionally he'd come by and he'd say, "I'm not seeing you sit there with your feet up on the desk enough." He would say that almost all the time. And his comment when I sat down and talked to him is he says, "You're spending so much time being busy that you don't have time to think about those things that really matter." And so I think about that to this day. That's probably the single best piece of advice that I had ever gotten, was just stopping and taking a moment to think about what you're doing. That leads me to, one of my favorite quotes is by Henry Ford, who said, "Thinking is the hardest thing that human beings do, which is why so few people do it." And many times we're so busy doing what we're doing that we forget to stop and think. So
let me take you back a little bit earlier. You were saying that one of the things that you've benefited from is this ability of self-reflection. Is there a particular practice of self-reflection that you use, or is it just something that's continually going on in your mind?
Well, I do have a practice that every night at the end of the day, I do sit back and take a moment to think about the day's events. Now, I used to write them down and talk about them. I just do it mentally today, but I'll spend probably half an hour, 45 minutes just thinking about the events of the day. And I'll rehearse in my mind what went well, what didn't go well. And then I just think about those things that didn't go well and what I might do differently in the future and how I might use that. And with that, then I turn and go to bed. I've always tried to do that. And it's almost an unconscious thing for me now, is to think about those issues and what I could have done differently, and then resolve that next time I get an opportunity, I'm going to do them differently. And I just go to sleep. As a result, I don't spend a lot of time tossing and turning, during the night. And I get up the next day and I've got my list that's all ready to go, and away I go.
Do you ever find that you get insights between when you go to sleep and when you wake up with an insight in terms of the particular issue that you need to address?
Well, that's a whole nother podcast we could probably do, but I've got a big belief in, the power of the universe and how all that stuff happens. And I do believe that focusing in on being very, very clear on what those issues are that you're trying to resolve, and then kind of letting them go, and then coming back and sitting down and rethinking about them, the insights you get are amazing.
It's interesting.
I'm also a big believer that, probably I get most of my inspiration in the shower in the morning.
Yep.
That's where I've had probably some of my best ideas. I'm going to say that, I heard a quote sometime that said, "When was the last time you had a good idea at work?" And I have a tendency to believe that sometimes you just have to understand that you've got issues that are out there and you have to kind of park them aside. And it's amazing how you come back and come up with the inspiration in order to come up with a solution. But it happens more often than it doesn't.
Let's say I am that construction leader running around with like a chicken with my head cut off. How do I get to the place where I'm spending more time with my feet up on the desk? What do I need to focus on there?
Well, I think that you need to make an assessment of what it is exactly that you're doing. So what I really try to do is take everything I know in my head and do a dump down on either in my computer or on paper of everything I know that has to be done. And then I go through that list and I sort out what are those things that I need to do and what are those things that others can do. And so I sort the list that way. And then when I take a look at the list of what it is that I need to do, I sort that into two different piles. What are the tactical things I have to do and what are those things that deal with people? And I put the things that I have to deal with people up first, and I knock those out. And if I can get to the tactical things, then that's how I get to those.
What do you mean by the tactical things specifically?
Things that I have to do, develop a new process for, look into what we're doing for strategic project qualification process, or if I have to take a look at renewing our bonding capacity or touching base with the bonding company, or some of those things that are just tasks that I have to do, as opposed to I need to reevaluate our leadership team, or I need to do those things that involve the employees or people or customers are always boil to the top of my list. If I've got to make a phone call, returning my phone calls comes before I get at some of my other stuff, because those are the things that I view as dealing with people.
Do you divide that list between the things that you can do and the things that others can do? Many leaders struggle with taking on too much and not delegating enough. What are some of the insights that you've learned over the years to effective delegation?
Boy, it's been a slow transition. One is coming to the understanding that there are things that I'm good at and there's things that other people are really good at as well. And understanding that although they may not do it exactly the way that I would do it, they may actually get a better result. I think it's been just over time, it's been the general awareness that I have to allow others the opportunity to be successful. And so for people to be successful, they have to have an opportunity to succeed. But in order to succeed, they have to have an equal opportunity to fail.
Right.
And so allowing somebody the opportunity to take responsibility for it, I think, is a huge turning point for me. The other thing was understanding that when people bring problems to me, that they're really not bringing them to me to solve those problems. They're bringing them to me just to let me know what's going on. I can provide some input, but when they walk out of the room, it's still their problem to solve, and allowing them that space in order to do that. That's a hard thing to do for a problem solver in the construction industry, is rely that the person that you just delegated it to is going to own it and get it done. Now, I think that there's a difference between delegating and dumping. And I think occasionally we all have a tendency to dump a little bit. But delegating means following back up and ensuring, that the individual that is doing that has all the resources they need in order to get it done, and always being willing to jump in and lend support to help them, not to take it over and do it for them, but to help them to accomplish the tasks that they need to get done. And I think that's how we as leaders can help our people grow. Get them into new experiences, and understanding that each new experience is uncomfortable for them. And it's our job to help them get a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable. That's an okay feeling. When I first started in construction, I used to drive myself crazy thinking that something was wrong with me because I had problems on the job, until I realized that was really my job, was to identify the problems and then resolve them. And then it got a little bit easier.
One of the challenges that a lot of leaders have is struggling with the fact that they are so good at doing certain things. They come into new leadership roles and they just shouldn't be doing those things. How do you advise leaders to stop trying to be the hero, or to let go of those things that are no longer in their area of responsibility?
Yeah, Eric, that's a good question. What I typically do is help them understand the best way to do. I can come explain it to them, but logic in these situations never works, because what they're used to doing feels comfortable, and what they should be doing is uncomfortable. And so what I help them understand is what they really need to be doing. And what usually ends up happening is they don't have the time, capacity, or bandwidth to do both. And so helping them understand that these are the items that I really need you to get done. And if you're going to be spending all your time still focused on this, you're going to drive yourself into the ground. So in essence, what I help them try to do is get to that same situation I did, where you personally understand that you're either going to choose to carry on differently, or you're going to live with this burden that's not going to allow you to advance. they're going to have to learn it on their own, so to speak.
The clear definition of a role and then a commitment playing that role and then allowing people to play their clearly defined roles is essential in terms of these kinds of things.
That's right.
You said that you have your background really had an influence on you in the way that your career has developed. What about that background do you think has been most helpful for you?
I think that I'm very good at reading situations I needed to be, right? My background, things could go from good to bad in a drop of a hat in a moment's notice. So you have to have a tendency to be able to read what's visible and also then read between the lines as to what else is happening. So I think I've got a keen ability to anticipate the unknowns probably better than most, and then have an ability to organize chaos a little bit differently, because there's some points of a project that just become chaotic, and being able to keep a cool head and managing through that is an important aspect of both management and leadership.
How do you keep a cool head?
It becomes a learned trait. Earlier in my career was a whole lot more difficult. I did not always keep a cool head, but you begin to learn those trigger points. One of the biggest advantages I see of the COVID pandemic that we've got going on and the use of Zoom and all these meetings is allowing people the opportunity to speak their mind and then actually listen to what they're saying. We just went through a strategic planning session where we were all on Zoom, and we had breakout rooms, and people had to provide their input. And the only way you could provide your input was to raise your hand. And then when the facilitator called on you, then you'd be able to speak. And it was a very disciplined process. And the value that I got was the same thing that, you talk about, how do you learn those traits? It's a learned behavior. You learn what your trigger points are, and you learn to take a deep breath, and you'll learn that not everything has to be dealt with immediately, and that there are other points that you can hear. And so the Zoom meeting to me was really a response to the question that I'm saying, is that you learn to not be the first one to speak, and you learn to maybe make sure that you're listening to others more than you're listening to your own internal voice. And many times when you're doing that, especially in the Zoom meeting, you'll have a great point that you really want to get, and you really want to be able to say your point. And as you listen to the other person, you forget about what it is that was so important for you at the time. Learning what your trigger points are and taking a deep breath and understanding that it's a process, right? It's a lot of people have immediate reactions to certain things that happen, and there's nothing that's really critical. We're not doing surgery. People aren't going to die because of a decision that has to be made on a building. So understanding that and making sure you're taking the right time to make the right decision.
What are you learning from the new generation of leaders?
They are very technically astute, very smart at being able to read situations. How they can adapt the use of technology into construction is absolutely amazing. Things that used to take me forever to get done, they can do in a short period of time. Their use of data analytics is absolutely amazing as well, in order to anticipate what's going to happen in the construction industry. I think that again, that all works out really, really well. The one thing I think that they all still need to understand is the power of the relationships. I think that, as I've seen over the years, I think that this business lends itself to be more transactional based. And I think that still the understanding that leading people is all about building the relationships, whether you're leading project teams or whether you're leading people to get those projects done, it's all revolves around the relationships.
Why do you think the younger generation struggles with that idea of the power of relationships?
I think a lot of it has to do with the way that the communications that we have is all instantaneous. I mean, we were talking about this the other day. And as I watched through my career, I started before they had fax machines, right? So I remember everything had to go out by mail. I was at the tail end of people don't remember mimeograph machines, but I remember they were at the very start of my career. And then the fax machine came out, and that was urgent, right? So if you got a fax, we even used a different color paper in the fax machine, because if somebody put a piece of blue paper on your desk, you knew that was urgent. You had to respond to it right away. So that came out, and then you ended up with email came out, and then you end up with text messages. And now we've got Teams messages, and you've got so many different places that you can have and that you can get information. It's just almost too much sometimes. And I think the younger generation has grown up with that, immediate transfer of information, and it becomes more of a transactional as opposed to the value of spending a weekend with a customer, fishing, right? and getting to know somebody on a personal level, because that really has a big impact on business, or getting to really know your employees, understanding what they're dealing with, what are their personal situations, and trying to take the time and understanding who you're dealing with. The conflict that exists between a contractor, an architect, and an engineer has been there since the master builder's responsibilities were distributed.
Yep.
Really taking the time to get to know those, not as an architect or not as an engineer, but as people. The better that you can do that and have a better understanding of what drives them and what motivates them, you'll be way more successful in the industry.
I hear many times the conflict that occurs between generations in terms of communication style. Back in the day, the superintendent on the job site would have a more direct way of communicating, whereas today it seems that the younger generation isn't that direct. Are you seeing that? And if you are, how do you guys manage that as you're dealing with different generations in your business?
I think that the younger generation probably is a little bit more direct.
Interesting.
Than maybe some of the previous generations in helping understand what it is that they're looking for and how they want to deal with things. And I think the older generation is a nicer generation. I want to say that the younger generation is probably more kind. And by that, I mean that they're more likely to tell you what it is that they're not seeing in their employee-employer relationship. Whereas in the older generation, you're just happy to have a job, so you were nice, right? I don't want to say anything because I don't want to create problems. So I do think that the mode of communication is much different, right? So understanding there's some that you need to pick up the phone and call them personally, and text messages and Zoom meetings like this. I think that they operate at a little bit different level, but what I see that's common to every one of them is the face-to-face interpersonal relationships are still important no matter what generation that you're dealing with.
Been in the business now for 30 years. Was there ever a point in your career where you hit a crisis where perhaps you were having challenges with your own motivations and your own leadership contribution?
Yeah, probably a number of them. Fortunately, it's an industry that I love. There's been times that I've become extremely frustrated with the industry. It's a difficult industry to work with. You're dealing with all personality types, and you're dealing with deadlines and constraints, and there's high pressure in it. And you begin to doubt yourself a little bit. And through that whole process, I do acknowledge the necessity to step away from it and be able to take time for myself without feeling guilty that I'm doing that. I think everybody needs to do that. There's only so much that anybody can take. And also with the understanding that everybody says that I always give you 110%, and I'm really not looking for 110. I'd like to have a consistent 80, because if you're giving me 110, then I ask you to give me 120, at some point in time, you're going to burn out. So making sure that we're operating within our own bandwidths, and everybody is a little bit differently. So there were a lot of times I probably question, my leadership and whether or not I was doing the right thing at the right time. And I think that that's where my ability to self-reflect and try to acknowledge that, and not try to beat myself up so much about what might have happened, but resolve it and direct it more towards what I was going to do in the future, has probably helped me out a great deal. It's allowed me to get through some of those times.
I've never heard that before. Give me a consistent 80% as opposed to 110%. Is that part of the culture there at Boldt in terms of how you guys work with each other?
Well, I don't know if it's part of the culture. It's a belief that I have. I've spent a lot of time, evaluating how much work, all of my direct reports have out on their plate, and making sure that we're distributing enough so that we're all carrying the load, because there's always going to be those times that we have to step up and do 110%. And if we're already overwhelmed, we're just going to have no capacity to do what needs to be done. So I think that the culture at Boldt is a caring culture. I think it's one that we put an emphasis on our employees, both on, what they want to accomplish personally as well as professionally, and making sure that we're not overwhelming them.
What do you look for in a leader that tells you they're starting to burn out a little bit and they may need to step away? Well, what are some of those red flags?
Usually it has to do with their temperament and changes in their behavior. Somebody that's usually very attentive to the details all of a sudden starts to slip and starts to not care about them so much. I spent a lot of time, what I've used to be in the mix with the employees, and you hear about a lot of things, you talk to a lot of different people, but as I rose in the organization, I find that I find out less and less about what's really going on. I go talk to somebody, ask them how things are going. Everything's always going well. And so I learned to develop networks of people that I can lean on and rely on, so I can understand where the issues are and address them appropriately.
So interesting. The leader always needs someone or a network of people, if possible, who are going to tell them the truth, right?
That's exactly right. And trying to create a culture and an environment where that's okay. So I get a lot of feedback from my direct reports. It's a question that I always ask is, what can I do better? And they know that they can tell me what it is that they see, that they feel that I could work on to be better. Because if I'm better, then that helps them be better, and that helps the company be better. And taking that approach of being kind, not necessarily nice, being kind to point out to somebody where the flaws are so that they can do something about it. Because if there's a problem and we don't know about it, there's nothing we can do about it. Just to pretend it doesn't exist is not going to do anything for us. And we take that same approach both personally as we do, professionally. So
that's interesting, the distinction you make between kindness and niceness there. And to be kind is to tell people the truth.
Be kind is to tell people the truth. I believe that everybody in our organization, first of all, has positive intentions. Nobody's there to do a bad job. Nobody wants to purposely tear anybody down. Right? When I hear people complain about people, it's maybe because they haven't done what they thought that others expected them to do, or they didn't take care of this correctly, or they thought this could have been done better. And what it really boils down to is we just sometimes really don't understand what that individual knew at the time. So if we take the approach that, everybody's got positive intentions, and what our job is to really find out what they were thinking when it happened, then we can make slight course corrections and tell them what the issue is. Because if we don't, there's no way that they can improve it.
That takes a lot of self-discipline to keep that in your mind, that everyone has positive intentions.
It's tough because I think the human brain has a tendency to focus on the negative more than it does on the positive.
Yeah.
And we all have things that irritate us. And when we see that, and that feeling inside is of irritation, we always want to jump to the negative. And we always want to say that individual purposely did that to me, or they went out of their way to make that happen. And reality is that it just happened, right?
Yeah.
That we don't want it to happen again. And the other individual, if you don't tell them that situation irritated you, they're never going to know. They're just going to keep doing it.
Right.
And so they really want to be accepted, and they want to help the company grow. So it helps, being kind helps pull everybody into alignment.
As you look back at your career, what are one or two things that, if you had to start your journey over again, that you would do differently?
Well, first, I take a few less engineering courses and probably a few more psychology courses, because that psychology would probably help me and benefited me a whole lot more than the engineering courses did. Other than that, understanding people a little bit better, I don't know if I would have done a whole lot different for a number of reasons. I think that I was very fortunate with the organizations that I had worked with. Yep. I've been truly blessed with the Boldt company and all that they have provided and allowed me to do. Probably the single biggest turning point, I think, in my whole career happened when it was like a light went on, and I understood that my success in my career was not so much dependent upon what the company was going to do for me, but what I was going to do for the company, or what I was going to do for that. The company provided me the opportunities. It was really my responsibility to take advantage of those opportunities. And I had the choice to take care of them or not to take care of them. I could have said no. In a lot of cases, I said yes. So coming to the realization that I had more to do with my success than the company did was a big learning moment for me. And so I wish I would have learned that sooner, coming to the realization that I had more control of my future and what was going to happen than the company did. A lot of the times, I think I thought early in my career, it's, what's the company going to do for me and my ability to advance in this company? If the company would just give me this promotion or that promotion, until I realized that it was my responsibility to take control of it and move it forward.
Those two insights: spend more time on the psychology side, and then take complete responsibility for your career success, and realize that the company is giving you a platform, but you have the responsibility to maximize your own impact there.
That's exactly right.
Obviously, you've recently taken on the role of president. And what do you want your legacy to be in terms of your impact on Boldt, but also on your impact on the construction industry in general?
The impact that I want to have on the industry is I want to help a lot of people. I want to continue to grow the Boldt organization. And the only way that I can continue to grow the Boldt organization is to grow a lot of people. So my legacy that I want to leave behind is putting in place a culture that builds an organization that allows people basically to rise up to whatever level that they choose to rise up to. Right? Yep. Create tremendous opportunities. And in that, then I want to continue to provide innovation to the construction industry of how we can do things better to build the buildings and design them in ways that never been done before. Or big believer in innovation and how we can leverage all that to continue to build the industry. I'd like to get everybody to understand that the construction industry is a great industry to work in. There's a lot that can be accomplished. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of things that we can do. It's not, the construction industry has gotten a little bit of a bad rap over the years is not being very sophisticated. And I think that we're every bit as sophisticated as any industry that I've seen.
Yep.
And I'd like to continue to promote that and continue to provide our customers with, the lowest cost building and the shortest amount of time and the highest degree of quality that we possibly can. And I think the only way that we can do that is work together. So my whole future from now to the end of my career is going to be built on building the relationships, whether it's the relationship with our employees or the relationship with our customers or the relationship with architectural and engineering partners or subcontractors, or whether it's the communities that we work in. That's really where I'm going to focus my time.
So as we're wrapping up here, Dave, I just want to ask you two final questions. First one is, what are your top 1 to 3 books that you would recommend a leader to read?
Number one is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Classic.
Teaches the power of what to focus on, and that always setting goals and always having targets, because if you don't have a target, you don't know where you're going. Even if it's the wrong target, you can always change what those targets are, but always have a focus in mind.
Excellent.
The second book is one that I'm really sold on, and I read it just recently, but it's a book called Everybody Matters by Bob Chapman, and is an outstanding book. Then the last one that probably would recommend is Ideal Team Player, and that is, and I don't know why I'm drawing
Lencioni.
Lencioni is the author of that one. I think that those qualities of humble, hungry, and smart are appropriate to almost any business and kind of fit in with my philosophy.
Excellent. We'll put links in the show notes to those. And then finally, Dave, I know you spend a lot of time traveling to the various parts of the United States. So I'm gonna hit you with a really important question here. What is your favorite restaurant?
My favorite restaurant, Silver Coach in Stevens Point, Wisconsin.
Silver Coach
in Stevens Point, Wisconsin.
Man, Steven, and why is that your favorite?
It's an old dining car that they converted into a restaurant. They've got a menu there that they've had the same menu for a lot of years. So predictability is a big thing for me. I can go in there. The steaks that they have are awesome and out of this world. But if I had to say that's one place that I'd like to go, that's probably the place that I would go. And I've had the opportunity to eat in a lot of different restaurants across the country, and a lot of good experiences. There's a lot of good restaurants, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably say Silver Coach in Stevens Point, Wisconsin.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, once again, Dave, I really appreciate your time, and this conversation has been extremely insightful.
Eric, always good talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity. And to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.